Welcome to Search for Signs. My name is Gary Willing. If this information interests you, please press the like and subscribe button and press the bell for notifications. I hope you're doing well today. It is August the 16th, 2020, and it has been a few days since I put up a video. It's actually been over a week. So typically I put videos up about, every 2 or 3 days? If I go a little longer than that, I'll say it's been a minute since I put a video up. It's actually been more like 5 minutes since I put a video up. So do apologize about that. I just had kind of a crazy work schedule this week, and it made it difficult for me to put videos up. I could have put them up, but I would have been rushed to put them up. So I wanted to kind of have some focused time where I could really think about what I have to say. I know what you're going to say. Gary, don't you just throw up the videos and just walk away and get on with your life? No, actually, I do put some time and effort into it. I know it doesn't sound like it, but I do. So I am back, baby. Yeah! All right. Now, I do have one question to cover and a couple comments. And if you have a question about Maitreya, the Masters of Wisdom, you can always post your question as a comment, or you can email me directly at searchforsigns@mail.com. All right. So the first and only question I have to cover in this video, I replied to it a few days ago. So he could, I didn't want to wait too long to reply. So, but I do want to talk a little bit more about it. For one, you might be like me, where you don't necessarily, when you watch videos, you might not necessarily go down and read people's comments. I know when I watch a music video, for instance, I don't need somebody to tell me whether the music is good or not. I've already made up my own mind, about what I think about the video. And I do that with everything. So I don't normally go down and just read everybody's comments. I got other things, better things to do with my life than to hear somebody else's opinion. But anyway, so let's get on into it. But, also too, I want to go in a little more in depth in what he said, what I said to him. So anyway, so it says, Mr. Gary Willing, we are indeed very lucky. I have experienced such uplifting from listening to all this information. If you don't mind suggesting 2 or 3 books that Benjamin Creme has written. Sorry, I know you have addressed this before, but he has so many books. Thank you again for sharing your thoughts and knowledge. Yeah, I'm a lot like my grandfather. I'm sharing my thoughts and knowledge. He used to actually share his thoughts and knowledge whether you asked for it or not. Love you, Grandpa, wherever you are. I miss you. Anyway, he was very opinionated. So, which is another reason why I don't necessarily read other people's comments and opinions, because why do I need you to help me formulate my own opinion? I've already formulated my opinion. Yes, I don't mind answering it again. The 2 or 3 books that I recommended, the first one was Maitreya's Mission Volume 2. The second one was a transmission and meditation for the new age. And the third one is A Master Speaks. So there were 3 Maitreya Mission books. The first one is just as good as the third one. It's just a little bit more dated. And I do think that what he talked about in Maitreya's Mission Volume 2 would, because I've read all those books, would give you a better foundation for reading the other books, is really what it amounts to. But it's not something you have to read cover to cover for it to make sense. You can read page 126 and then go back and read page 25 and then go to 252. You can read it all over the place, because they're compiled question and answers that were published in the Share International Monthly Magazine. So, but it's a wonderful book. And I recommended Transmission and Meditation for the New Age, because if you're starting to find this information, uplifting, as you say, so put it yourself, right? And you're wanting to get additional information from Benjamin Creme's books, well, you also should start to apply it in some form of service. And the simplest but yet best way is transmission meditation, really. So it talks about that. But he talks about transmission meditation in Maitreya's Mission Volume 2, so you can at least get started in it. So if you can't get your hands on the other book for now, that's fine too. And then if you go to the Share International webpage, there's a whole section on transmission meditation and ways to connect with transmission meditation groups in your area or so forth, or even how to start your own group if that's something you want to do, because it has to be done in a group. So anyway, hopefully that helps. And then, of course, A Master Speaks, is just, it's a wonderful book to read. His master, people used to ask all the time what the name of his master was, and Benjamin Creme said he could not tell everybody his name. He said his name was being withheld for a time, so eventually we'll know it, but he did say that his name was well known within esoteric circles, and he was a senior member of the hierarchy. So he's a pretty advanced master. So that's one reason to read it, But when if you read A Master Speaks and read these articles, okay, you get a better sense of what he's trying to say. You can start to internalize the words for yourself and not just hear it from me. Now, if I was Morgan Freeman and I was reading it to you, it'd probably be pretty cool. But, I'm me. But you can start to, because each one of his sentences are just jam-packed with so much truth, wisdom, and light, man. I mean, but yet they're so simple, and when you read the words, you can stop for a second, maybe go back and read it again if you wanted to or whatever, where if you're just hearing it from me, you don't get that sense. So I know it cheapens it when I do it, but it's better than nothing, So that's the reason why I do it. But it's always, like I said, I would definitely recommend it as a book. And it's also, a lot of them are very prophetic, and there was one master's article I read not too long ago where he said, as Maitreya's Day of Declaration gets closer to the day of, as the time comes to, it gets closer to the Day of Declaration or something like this, Maitreya's Day of Declaration, ancient landmarks will be torn down and obliterated. And what's going on in the United States right now? All these statues of these historical figures that are any way connected to slavery are being torn down because it reminds people of the injustice of slavery, right? So, and then you have the reactionary forces that are totally against the tearing down of these flags, or the Confederate flags, or these landmarks that remind of these soldiers during the Civil War and so forth. So it's interesting to see it based on what Benjamin Crumb's master was talking about, right? Which is, he was also talking about the tearing down of the Berlin Wall, because that was a symbol in and of itself. It was just a wall, but it was a symbol of separation between what was once a unified country and city, and then they tore it down, and now it's a unified country, So the landmarks had their purpose, and now they should be destroyed, in a lot of ways. But it has a different perspective. It gave me at least a different perspective on what's going on today in the United States. So you can kind of take it and look at it from that standpoint. So hopefully that helps. All right. Now, Maitreya's Mission Volume 3, I wanted to address this one because this is a wonderful book too, but it's a little deeper, I think, than Maitreya's Mission Volume 2. It goes in a little more in depth into some of these things. And I've touched on it a little bit, but Benjamin Crumb talked about the rays a lot in all his books, really. But there are 7 streams of energy that affect everything from an atom to a solar system and everything in between, including us. And the vast majority of humanity, for all intents and purposes, is totally ignorant of the laws of life. And a big part of the laws of life are the rays. Whether we believe it or not, it doesn't matter. They are a big part of all our lives. And so he talks about the rays and how it affected the way that the Renaissance painters painted, because Benjamin Crumb was a painter. So it gives if you're into art, it gives a different perspective on the artists that you might already be familiar with. If you're interested at all in the rays, it definitely helps to ground, especially when you start looking at the images of these paintings, or hopefully go to a museum and see it in real life. It gives a different perspective on the rays. So for instance, Raphael, who is one of the great Renaissance painters, who's now a master in the hierarchy of masters on this planet, had a lot of second ray of love wisdom in his makeup. So his paintings are very soft, very warm, very gentle. His themes are even soft and gentle. And then you take a look at El Greco, who was another Renaissance painter who had a lot of first ray in him, or Michelangelo even had a lot of first ray will or power in their makeup. Well, El Greco's strokes, his brush strokes, are what are called nervous strokes, but they're very powerful. They're much more, and his edges are much more powerful, and his themes are very powerful. And the first way will or power can be very hard to take sometimes. So it's a different energy. So if you're, when you see an El Greco painting, it's like, whoa, you might have to step back for a second and then come back to it, because it can be overwhelming sometimes. But that first ray is very, very powerful. And so it came out in their art. And to hear an artist, a very accomplished artist, and also a very accomplished esotericist talking about the ageless wisdom teachings based on their art is just, I don't know, to me, I found it invaluable. So, and there's a whole chapter in that book about it. So anyway, it's quite a wonderful read from that standpoint too. So hopefully that helps. All right. Now that hopefully answers that question. Now the comment there's two comments I want to address, and they kind of go hand in hand. And I don't normally address comments. Like I said, I don't take the time to do it, but I know I'm proving myself wrong in this one. But the first comment actually is not even on my channel. I did a video interview back in July. The YouTube channel's name was Nature of Reality Radio. And Rick, who was the one that just asked the question about the books, wrote, Gary is no average guy for sure. Thank you, Andrew, for bringing forth Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom's information. Great show and host. Now, Andrew, I want to say I am just an average guy. But this information that has come my way that I'm passing off to other people is quite extraordinary, to say the least. Maitreya is on TV portraying himself as an ordinary person, but he is nowhere near being an ordinary person, let alone an average person, right? And he's no average master. He's quite an extraordinary master, let alone, human being. But me, I'm just an average person, and I'm not trying to portray myself as anything other than just a person sharing, information with you that's kind of come my way. Benjamin Creme used to always say that he had one of the easiest jobs out there because his job was never to convince anybody. It was just to tell you about it. You take what it is, for yourself, internalize it for yourself, use it or not, or whatever it is. That was totally up to you. And he just go on and tell somebody else, right? So that's really the purpose and function of what I'm talking about in this channel. So I don't claim any truth to this. I don't, I know it's true for me, right? But I don't claim any truth, and I don't, I'm not trying to, I know people have accused me of trying to convince them, but I'm not trying to convince anybody of anything. And that kind of leads me to the next comment, which is, you are totally wrong about every single thing that you are trying to promote. All your thoughts are going to come back on you. And then somebody put in there, how do you know he's totally wrong? Perhaps just maybe he could be totally right. Now, in the video that they were referring to, which was the last video that I put up, I know I at least got the date right. Everything else I might have said might have been totally off. Right? But anyway, the reason why I'm addressing this and not just leaving it alone and moving on with my day is because it also kind of ties into the Masters article that I'm talking about. But life today is about competition, and it really shouldn't be. So when somebody says you're right or you're wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong, or whatever, right? Which I'm not saying that I'm right and you're wrong. Okay, so it's based on competition, and that manifests throughout all our life. So when you talk about religion, talk about politics, talk about sports, talk about any topic, it's all about being right and not being wrong or whatever like this. Now, I've read Benjamin Creme's books for years. And I've actually talked to Benjamin Creme about what I thought he was saying. And this is what a lot of times what he would say to me, that is total glamour, Gary, which is his way of saying you're totally wrong. So, just because I'm saying it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right, is my point, right? But it's not you can be right and wrong at the same time. And you can be wrong and be right at the same time, I guess. It's a question of seeing what's real and seeing it, which none of us really are, because we're under the illusion of glamour. Only the masters really see life for what it really is, which comes from the very first thing is the belief that we are separate. So when you see Maitreya on TV, which I know eventually you will, or if you see him in your life in person, he is a quite extraordinary master. The divinity of which he's manifesting is far greater than any one of us are doing at this moment in time, right? But you would see a man who's totally, humble, right? Because he knows the truth. He knows that you are just as divine as he is, just as divine as a solar system, just as divine as a galaxy. It's just the level of which you're manifesting it. So there is no right or wrong. It's just a question of what is real and what is unreal. And that, I think, is the problem in politics today, because people are arguing so much. They're trying to convince somebody else. They think they're right and somebody else is wrong, but yet humanity is suffering. So both sides are wrong. There's no right in politics anymore, because and the reason why they're wrong is because they believe themselves as separate, and they believe them separate from their own people, right? So that's the problem, if that makes any sense. So I know when I bring up politics and I talk about politics, it can trigger people emotionally, but it's just, and I'm not even saying that I'm 100% right on it. It's just my own view on it, right? But at the same time, we do need to change the situation, and we can't just keep arguing about this. It's ridiculous, really, to be honest. But, the problem with, I think, because people also quote the Bible and throw biblical quotes my way or whatever. The problem with believing you're right or wrong too, when it comes to spirituality and religion, is people read, as a general rule, they'll read one passage in the Bible, close the Bible up, and whatever their thought was, their initial thought, they're right. That's not the way the Bible should work. And I know people who have even done this with the ageless wisdom teachings of the master Joel Kuhl or even Benjamin Creme. They read it one time and they think for sure that whatever their first thought was is the right one. And then they go with it. When you read the Bible, and I'm of the opinion, when you read the Bible, you should read it, look at it, internalize it, apply it, look at it again, maybe look at it from a different angle, tear down that belief on that, bring it another one, and look at it like that. And then it becomes alive. And it's not this stale words on a page. Because when people just regurgitate and recite biblical verses, it's boring for those of us who have to endure somebody doing that, but I'm sure it's even stale to that person. You know what I mean? But it's just, it should be alive. The book of Revelations is alive and going on today, but not in the way that people are thinking, because they have such a fearful view of it, because they're seeing it incorrectly as far as I'm concerned, but they're seeing it from a view of fear and separation. If they looked at it from a unified, like life is, we're all one, it's quite a hopeful book, actually, but you have to look at it from that standpoint. So it's not a question of right or wrong. It's a question of, are you seeing it for real? Or are you seeing it for the unreal? And then when it comes to the political thing, people, like I said, are trying to, I'm right and you're wrong. And they argue back and forth based off of that. When really you should be looking at, what is the problem? The problem right now is we have a world that's dying. We have people that are starving. We have people that are unemployed now, even in the developed worlds and so in countries and so forth. We have to solve this problem. So arguing back and forth, what's that going to solve, really? Does that make sense? So again, it's not a question of right or wrong is my point. But again, you can either believe it or not. And this information is for you to consider. But even if you hear this information or you see this picture of Maitreya, when you see him on TV, it's going to make it easier for you to recognize him. It's going to make it easier for you to start to hear his priorities. Because Maitreya is not coming as a religious leader. He's coming as a economic and political advisor, really. Initially at least, but that's really the areas of which are in most need, because it's the political and economic problems that are causing everything. And so he's there to address those problems, but if you look at the environment, which I'm going to be talking about in the master's article that I'm about to read, he's talking about how the economic situation of commercialization and how it's damaging the environment, and we don't have a lot of time left. He even said, this was written in 2009, so he said that we have 10 to 15 years at most. We've already gone past the 10 years. Hopefully it's more like the 15, right? And I don't know I have no idea, but I'm hoping that the 2 months that the world was in lockdown, and I started to notice a change in the air quality and so forth, and even the temperature went down in the spring, that maybe possibly it bought us a little bit of time, and I know the Space Brothers, as much as they've been helping over the years and decades to clean up the environment as much as they can, there was images of hundreds of UFOs entering our atmosphere during that time of the lockdown. So they might have been here helping just, incredible amount more in order to buy us some more time. I don't know, hopefully, keeping my fingers crossed for that one. But we don't have a lot of time left. So, right or wrong or whatever, right or left politics, the people are progressive. According to the masters, it's not going to be the governments that solve the problem. It's going to be all of us that do it. If you look at this planet, humanity is the only group on this planet that's destroying our planet. The animals aren't. The vegetable kingdom is not. The masters aren't. It's us. We are the only ones that can do it. We're the ones that are harming the environment. But yet we are also the only ones that can solve the problem. We can't expect the sharks to solve the problem. We have to do it, right? So, but it's coming closer and closer and closer to the time that we have to start doing something. Or as this master says in the Master Speaks, that it's going to be too late. Now, rest assured that Maitreya being on TV, even though we haven't recognized him yet, or most of us haven't, he's not wasting any time. And there will be a time where he starts to speak more directly and with a greater sense of urgency about our problems, that it will be easier and easier for those who know this information to see him on TV and go, yep, that's him. You know what I'm saying? Now, when I read this article, I want to emphasize the urgency of the time to solve the problem, but I also want to emphasize something that he didn't really speak about. Is there are two major forces, spiritual forces on this planet, the forces of light and the forces of darkness. And the forces of darkness are nearly as powerful, not as, but nearly as powerful as the forces of light. And this war has been raging on for eons. But they have their people in place just as the masters have their disciples working in the world. And they know how to manipulate political opinions, popular opinions, and they do it without worrying about infringing on the free will. Just the masters do. The masters are very concerned about that law, so they work within that law, but the forces of darkness don't have to worry about that. They can just do whatever they want to do, So they throw out these buzzwords like the radical left, and they throw out these, and it's all coming from the forces of darkness doing this to keep people enthralled. It's time for us to stop listening to the reactionary forces and start understanding that you and I and everybody else pretty much want a peaceful world. We want a world to live in. We want a world that the environment is actually sustainable enough that future generations can still live here, I would assume, you know what I'm saying? And most of us, or probably all of us, don't like or don't want any more war. But yet we listen to the reactionary forces on TV, which is coming from the forces of darkness. So you have to be very careful to not get swept up into all that. So, but anyway, this is coming from the master, Benjamin Creme's master, and it's entitled The Curse of Commercialization, and it was published in Share International in May of 2009. If men are to save this planet from the results of global warming, they must do infinitely more than is planned to limit carbon emissions, and in a shorter period of time than is generally accepted as necessary. Men have been slow to recognize the dangers, and even now many refuse to take the problem seriously. Such attitudes, there is no doubt, put in jeopardy the future of planet Earth. At most, men have 10 to 15 years in which to establish a balance before irreparable damage is done. To achieve this goal, men must change dramatically the present way of life and embrace simpler forms of living and working. Gone are the days in which men raped and ravaged the planet at will without a thought for the generation still to come, neither seeing nor caring aught for their environment, which has gradually and inevitably decayed. Each year, for many years, huge areas of ancient primal forest are cleared of life-giving trees for purely commercial benefits. Commercialization indeed bodes ill for humanity as it tightens its grip on the throats of men. Commercialization, says Maitreya, is more dangerous to men than the atomic bomb, and is showing its destructive power in the economic chaos which rules in the world today. How long will it take governments and their peoples to see this? How long till commercialization squeezes the lifeblood out of humanity and itself withers and dies? More and more, the truth of these words is borne in on the minds of millions who now suddenly are jobless and homeless and in despair. This has produced a situation in which Maitreya can step forward into public work without infringing humanity's free will. Patiently has Maitreya waited many years for this time, sure in the knowledge that the events now taking place would indeed transpire. Commercialization has bared its claws and shown its power to harm. The complacency of millions is turning into hatred and distrust of commercialization and the old order of things. Men everywhere are at last ready for a new interpretation of the meaning and purpose of life, for sharing justice and peace, for right relationship, brotherhood, and greater happiness. They are ready at last for Maitreya's call. Of course, not all men have undergone this change. There are many who imagine they can quote unquote sit out this recession and rebuild their fortunes as before. They believe, or the very rich and clever ones have lost nothing. The gap between themselves and others has simply widened in their favor. They fail to understand that this time is like none other. We have reached the end of the old order. Cosmic forces dictate the changes that must and will take place. Otherwise, life would flourish no more on planet Earth. Those who are ready will quickly respond to Maitreya's teaching as he puts into simple and eloquent words their heartfelt needs. Others will take longer to forego that to which they have become accustomed and for a time disagree. In time, millions around the world will see the need and the logic of the changes which alone will save the planet and its peoples. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.